in out of school time, hosted by our friends at Michigan After School Partnership. So welcome, happy Monday to you. Happy maybe first day back into the groove of the new year. We've got many school districts starting back today. So if you made it here today, welcome. We're excited that you are here. My name is Carla Shinovar. I'm with Wayne Metropolitan Community Action Agency. And I'll let my co-host, Patty Wagner, introduce herself in a minute, but I just want to remind folks that we want you all to put your name in the chat, your title, your organization, and how many years you have been in out of school time. And so I'll kick it off again. I am Carla Shinovar. I'm the whole family school age services director for Wayne Metropolitan Community Action Agency. We are a community-based organization based here in Wayne County, serving all of Wayne County with many different comprehensive services. I represent our K through 12 initiatives. I work really closely with the 21st Century Learning Project, in addition to some other grants that fund after school programming. Been in the field going in my 24th year, been here at Wayne Metro the entire time. So believe very deeply in our mission and our service to students and families, and the out of school time field has just been a great opportunity to help the whole family, not only keep our students engaged in the after school world, but also connect family to much needed resources that may sometimes become a barrier to learning and getting kids in school. So happy to be here today along with my co-host, and I'll turn it over to Patty to say hello.
Hi, everyone. My name is Patty Wagner. I'm with Access. That's the Arab Community Center for Economic and Social Services. I've been working in out of school time for approximately 33 years. Access is an organization that has been serving people in the Detroit, Dearborn, Melvindale, North Allen Park area for 53 years. We, like Wayne Metro, are a community-based organization providing services to people, not just their children in youth and education and out of school time, but to families. We are considered a wraparound program. We can serve adults in the area of workforce development, families in social services areas, individuals in the medical area, mental health, immunizations, doctor visits, etc., all of those things. I am so excited to be here, grateful for the invitation. Thank you very much, MASP, for inviting me, and Carla. And Happy New Year.
Yeah,
Carla, back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Patty. Always a pleasure to work with Patty. Patty and I have worked alongside each other for many years now, so we're always happy to be able to tag team on these types of opportunities. So thank you to MASP for inviting us. Again, if you just joined us, we're asking that everybody add their name in the chat, their title, the organization that they represent, and how many years that you've been in the out of school time field. So as you're doing that, we're also going to kind of do another small, quick icebreaker. Seeing that it's the beginning of the new year, we're all back to school, most of us today. We also wanted to get a feel, not right this second, when I count to 3, I'm going to have you guys all put in what is your one word that describes your goal for this year, either with your career as a whole or within your program. If you have one word to describe that goal for your 2024 year, what might that be for either your career and after school or your individual program? So actually do a backwards countdown, a 3, 2, 1. So 3, 2, 1, drop it in the chat, and let's see kind of what you guys are thinking and feeling on this Monday morning. Connection, I like that. Effectiveness, consistency, I can relate to that. That's a good one. More employees. Yes. Totally hearing you. Succeed. Stability, individualize. Knowledge, understanding, patience, empathy. Great ones. Growth mindset. A lot of great goals. A lot of positive goals to be thinking of. I can relate to all of these. Awesome. Well, thank you for that. And I hope your new year is off to a good start career-wise and with your program. And I hope months from now, you're still focusing on these goals and that you've been successful with them. Okay, so tell you a little bit about our session today. You know, there are many components involved when it comes to staffing and supervision and out of school time. Today, Patty and I are going to focus on a few key areas that are essential to being a highly effective manager and leader in the out of school time space. We're going to dive into staff qualifications and job descriptions. We're going to do a group activity around vetting and making the most out of your interview process, about vetting candidates and making the most out of your interview process. We'll talk about what your supervision plan should entail. We're going to look at leading and managing your teams, things like crucial conversations, performance reviews, how and why managers should lean on and become comfortable with their HR department from whatever organization you're with. And then we'll conclude with some professional development topics and how managers can make sure plans are in place to ensure that your teams grow and thrive in this out of school time space. So the goal today is really for everyone to walk away with a takeaway or two to add to your management toolbox. And we'll also make sure we add time for questions and comments. We love to hear and learn from you all as well. And also very important, we want you to stick around till the end. There will be a survey that will be popping into the chat. I believe it's a QR code. We definitely want your feedback. We want you to get the most out of this. We want to know what your thoughts are so that we can plan and improve for future sessions down the road with MASP. Okay, so with that, before I dive into things, it's important to note there are three key systems that really influence, direct, and inform our work in the out of school time space. Programs that are considered high quality programs really operate from these three lenses, and they are licensing, the Michigan out of time standards for quality, and then certainly the National After School Association's core knowledge, skills, and competencies. So if you're not familiar with any or all of these, you really want to lean into these. These are the three big areas for us in the out of school time space. Licensing really dictates that minimum health and safety standards, things like health inspections, what kind of equipment you have, do you have enough space, square footage to run your program for your age group? That's kind of the bare minimum, the foundation where we start. Our MOST standards developed here in Michigan, they help programs develop high quality, comprehensive programming for that K through 12 population, which is who we all serve. And then of course, at the national level, there's the core knowledge, skills, and competencies, which is a framework that outlines the knowledge, skills, competencies all of the individuals in our field need to offer high quality programming. So always keeping these in mind, Patty and I are when we are leading our teams and ensuring that our programs operate high quality. Okay, so really the first step in supervising and leading your team is to build your team, right? Who you have on your bench, who you're going to need to make sure your program can run day to day successfully. In our out of school time world, the team typically consists of, we usually have a manager, program coordinator. We sometimes have many different names for that management lead. It looks different in many organizations. And that's the truth in our field, that we do have different names for some of our titles. And then the other staff makeup is typically your youth development professional, I like to call it. And sometimes those are called lead caregivers, group leaders, tutors, after school practitioners, activity leader. Again, I'm sure you all have many different names for some of those boots on the ground staff that you work with. But in order to attract the right candidates, you really need to understand how each of these roles function in our world. So going back to kind of two of our bigger systems, for this conversation, I'm going to really rely heavily on licensing regulations, because that really dictates a lot, in addition to the Michigan out of school time standards of quality. Leaning on both of these is really going to help develop your team. And just a word of note, as you learn about Laura, if you're not familiar, those rules encompass both early childhood and school age. So when you're scanning through those rules and regulations, please make sure you pay particular attention to the school age sections of the rule book. It is a lengthy rule book, but it does have a lot in there about toddlers, diapering, nap times, things that necessarily don't take place in our world. So focus in on the school age sections. And then when we look at the most standards, there is section 3 in there, which refers to program staffing. So if you're referencing these two, and we can share some links, I can get those links in the chat. You'll want to focus in on section 3 for program staffing. Okay, so I want to bring your attention to this next slide. This is really if you're looking to onboard a program director. Typically, licensing refers to your program manager as your program director. So I'll be referring to it, since we're talking about licensing, as the program director. So the next couple of slides are going to focus on your director. And that's one of the first positions you want filled, is your leadership team, right? So not properly vetting your program director, you could run into issues with licensing, because your program director needs to be approved by your licensing consultant before anything happens. So it's important to know, when you're vetting that candidate, know exactly what you need to be looking for. And this chart kind of gives you a snapshot of what those credentials are. And I want to draw your attention to the area on the left-hand side of the screen where it lists child-related fields. This is pulled directly from the licensing book. These are the fields that licensing requires that your program director has. They don't have to have all of them, but they have to have some coursework or a degree in one of these areas. I won't read them all to you. You can see them there, things from early childhood. They've got social work, family studies, youth development, and so on. There's about 12 or 13 of those. Those are the key areas you want to be looking at when you're reviewing resumes. And so keeping those in mind, when you look at the chart to the right, the maximum, the ideal would be in this first box, as you identify someone with a bachelor's degree in one of those areas. So if you find that candidate and they have a degree in child psych, that's great. It is highly likely your person is going to be approved by licensing. But we know not everybody comes in the door with that advanced level of degree, and that's okay. So you can kind of look at the options here. If they have a Montessori credential in 12 semester hours in one of these child-related fields, plus 480 hours of experience, they would be approved by licensing, and so on and so forth. If they have an associate's degree in one of these fields, plus 480 hours of experience, they would be approved. Also want to highlight the MyYDA. If you're not familiar, hopefully you will be soon. That is our certificate and credential in our field, the Michigan Youth Development Associates. That is fairly new, but it's very important to our field. You can have that credential with 12 semester hours in these areas, plus 480 hours of experience, and be approved as a program director for licensing. Moving down more to the minimum requirements, you could have a valid CDA with 12 semester hours with 480 hours. And then also you could have 60 semester hours in one of these child-related fields, or a mix of those, and 12 semester hours, 60 semester hours in general in any field, but 12 specifically in those child-related fields, and then 720 hours of experience. So they're looking for a little more experience in that scenario. And then lastly, you can have your high school diploma or GED with 6 semester hours in one of these fields, or a combination, and quite a bit of experience, 2,880 hours worth of experience. And I will share on my team, I do have a few managers that meet this criteria and have been approved. by licensing as a program director. So it's really important to become familiar with these. You don't necessarily have to have your bachelor's degree. You can be working towards it. You could have other things that come into play. Okay. So the other thing too to focus on is what licensing expects this program director to be doing when they're on board with you. You want to make sure. This is especially important when building your job description, which we're going to talk about in later slides. But it's important to note these considerations. So obviously be present in the center, but licensing shares, if your program operates less than 6 hours, which a lot of us, we have programs that operate less than 6 hours, your project director needs to be there full time. If your project director is overseeing multiple sites and they can't be at sites all the time, they need to divide their time at least to be 50% at least one site. So you want to take a look at these licensing regs. Of course, they're responsible for the general program management. They want directors to develop policies and evaluate those policies. And then just the typical day-to-day operations help keep up with the flow of that, manage the staff, manage the budget, things like that. And we're going to talk about that too later on in the presentation. Some additional considerations, and this is kind of getting down into the nitty-gritty, but this might be helpful for some of you that may be trying to figure out how to staff your after-school program with a manager and have them approved by licensing. They need to have child care administration, either 2 semester hours or 3 CEUs, or you can obtain those hours by doing 30 hours of admin training in the My Registry platform. And we'll talk about My Registry in a minute, but hopefully most of you are familiar with My Registry as our professional development database for us in our field. Now, there are a couple exceptions and exemptions that are very important to know. Oh, sorry. Somebody have a question, or just making sure everybody's on mute if you're not asking a question. So if you were already employed as an approved director, you are exempt from the child administration rule. So if you've been in the field doing as a program director in an after-school program or another child care center, you don't have to take the child care administration because you've been kind of grandfathered in having those 10 years. If your program, you want to have it handled by a central administrator, that is somebody that meets those program director requirements, they can be flagged as a central administrator, and then you can kind of move to what's called a site supervisor model. And that will allow you to maybe bring someone on board who may not have those exact LARA program director credentials, but they can still be on as a site supervisor as long as you have that central administrator in place. And I'm going to talk more about that in the next slide. And then if you have multiple sites and you're looking for maybe one person to oversee multiple sites, this is kind of the world that I live in currently with my 21st century projects. I have one manager that oversees 3 sites, and that is the maximum under licensing that one program director can oversee. They can oversee up to 3 sites. You can be approved by licensing for that model. Certainly they have to be on site a certain amount of time. They have to have documented visits. And then lastly at the bottom, just a note about with licensing, you do need to make sure your program director's qualifications, credentials, et cetera, are in that My Registry professional database. And that is something licensing will go in and check from time to time to make sure that those qualifications are in there. So you want to be tight on that. And they do check those, I know from experience, they go in there quite a bit. So kind of going back to that site supervisor model, if that interests you, this is really only for sites that are either a before or just an after school program exclusively, one or the other. The site supervisor must be at least 19 years of age, have a high school diploma or equivalent. They must have that 480 hours of experience, which isn't a lot to get. Those add up quickly. They must have 16 clock hours or one semester hour or 1.5 CEUs of documented school age training. And they can be approved. Again, you must have that central administrator, that's somebody from your organization that will conduct site visits, that will help evaluate the program, monitor the program. They help develop and implement policies. They help monitor staff. And the site supervisor really will assist with the day-to-day operations. They can oversee staff. They can help implement program policies as well. And then they're on site, obviously, to address students and any staffing, family issues, and engagement. So that's the site supervisor model. So next in our world is the non-management team, right? And those come, like I shared early on, various different names for those group leaders, lead caregiver, after school practitioner, tutor, so on and so forth. When it comes to the non-management staff, your boots on the ground team, Laura allows for greater flexibility compared to our friends in early childhood. So as we all know, our field is made up of many different backgrounds, right? We have folks from education, some may have teachers on board, criminal justice, social work majors. I've got folks with youth ministry backgrounds. I have nannies on my team. I have students, college students, high school students. They come from all different walks of life. And oftentimes these are part-time positions, right? A lot of this work is part-time. So you don't have a lot of room to be super selective, right? Because it is part-time work and it's hard positions to fill. Early on in the chat, I noticed some folks were focusing on, staffing as a goal. And I very much relate to that. It is hard to find to fill those part-time positions. So as managers, you really need to be open to coaching and understanding that these are entry-level positions and that you have an opportunity to lead and coach, but you have to be willing to put in the time to do that. And that's what makes for a strong leader, investing in your team, right? You don't want to just fill a seat and then hope for the best if they don't have a lot of experience. You want to carve out some dedicated time to coach and lead. Something new to consider too, fairly new as of 2022 under the LARA guidelines, minors can now work in the school age program. So anybody 16 or 17. It used to be 18, so you can have our younger high school folks that may be interested in a career in education or want to spend some time with students, mentoring, tutoring. Keep in mind, sometimes these are our first teachers, right? Working in an out-of-school time program provides them with exposure to multiple age groups, experience with lesson planning, gaining knowledge of social emotional learning, so many opportunities. But again, you have to be willing to coach that youngster that's in your program. Okay, and then certainly most important for all staff under licensing, these are some of the additional requirements. Comprehensive background checks and fingerprinting. All staff need to have a signed abuse and neglect form on file, TB tests, mandated reporter training for everybody on your team, abusive head trauma training, and then bloodborne pathogen training, CPR. All of those are required by licensing. And again, those things need to be kept on site and on file in the event of a licensing visit. Now, one word about these things can take time, especially in your onboarding process. It can be easy to lose someone in that onboarding process if you are not tight on how quickly you can move people through these different systems. So, the comprehensive background check requires a consent form. How quickly you get that out and get that back and how quickly you set up that appointment is very important. You don't want to lose people in that process. TB tests. The onus is also on the candidate as well, right? To go back and have that test read and get that information back to you. So really, as a manager, you want to be solid, in the onboarding process, especially with these components, because they do take a little bit of time. So really working with your HR team is really paramount in this part. All right. Okay, moving along. So then I'm going to segue and talk a minute on the Michigan Out of School Time Standards of Quality as it relates to staff. So we just reviewed the LAURA criteria. Let's take a quick look at the MOST standards. Remember to keep in mind, MOST is an additional level above and beyond licensing, right? This is the next level, high quality. You want to try to aim to meet what's in the MOST. Licensing is bare minimum. It doesn't necessarily make a program high quality if you're just meeting licensing standards alone. So, whoops, go back. Sorry about that. Okay, so MOST is telling us that staff, they need to be well-trained with appropriate experience. High quality programs have staff on board that have that MyYDA, the Youth Development Associate Certification, or the credential. That's what you want to strive for. Just a word on that, Patty and I both, not everybody walks in the door, we know, with the MyYDA. It is fairly new, but we do want folks to strive to obtain that. So Patty and I, we are moving our teams along on a path to obtain that. And that goes back to that coaching piece as a manager. What are their career goals in the field? And the MyYDA is a great thing to strive for, but you can help as a manager or a supervisor set the tone, set the environment to get them on that pathway. The state has made it fairly easy to move folks along. Just the certificate alone, you really only need 40 clock hours. So as a manager, you can help connect your teams to those clock hours, help them along in the process. Again, qualifications, looking at the MOST, they say that it's ideal for your team to have an alignment with the core knowledge, skills, and competencies presented by the National After School Association. And then, of course, have your teams participate in 8 or more hours of pre-service orientation involving child, youth, and development. So, and that's pre-service, meaning kind of before they really start with you, boots on the ground, you're doing some investment on that in that onboarding process to get them acclimated to youth development and other areas in the field with professional development. Okay, so once you understand the requirements and recommendation of out-of-school time professionals and management, and those working directly with children, you can begin building out what those roles look like in your after-school program. That's going to help you attract the right candidate, right? We all want to attract the best staff possible. So the next couple of slides are going to provide examples of what a job description may look like for a management level role, and then for those working directly with students, those boots on the ground staff. Really, a strong job description is going to set the tone. And if you don't have a strong job description in place, it kind of messes with your roadmap on how you envision this person to be in your program. So this first example is of a program manager, and these are 2 examples taken directly from Wayne Metro and then Access. They're very similar, but they also have some differences as well. You want to make sure you have a strong scope. At Wayne Metro, we call it a scope. At Access, they call it a job summary, but that is your kind of your overall arching summary of what the major responsibilities and essential functions of the position are. So for us at Wayne Metro, our managers oversee multiple sites. So I have that language built in directly into my job description. You can see at the scope, this person is responsible for potentially managing up to 3 sites, right? So I make that clear. I put that in my job description. That is what you are going to be responsible for. Then I just highlighted some bolded, Patty and I bolded some key words. So you want to be very strategic and thoughtful with your language. So we have things like design. We want you to design curriculum. We want you to provide oversight, manage the budget. Budget's important. Keeping kids safe. Safety is an important part of the work. We want to make sure our managers operate with a safety lens. Patty's got, I love this, monitor, mentor, coach, going back to the previous slides. You definitely want to just be more than a manager. You want to mentor, you want to coach, you want to evaluate. You need to be comfortable assessing and evaluating your team. Serve, I like this, serve for many of us who are in 21st century type programming where you're sharing space. You want to be a liaison between your school day partner and your organization, right? That relationship is super, super important. Communication is built in there, right? Communication is huge on every front. So this slide deck will be available if you're, interested in pulling some of this language for your own job descriptions. Perhaps you guys have your own that are already great and that we could learn from. The important thing is that you have these in place and that you revisit them often. Sometimes positions change a little bit. You might need to tweak that job description over time because you're noticing something's got to change, something's got to be added, or something is no longer relevant. So revisit those, blow the dust off of them and take a good look at them. So the next one is for those non-management staff, those working directly with youth. In the resume, when you're scanning resumes, you certainly want to look for those child-related fields. If they have any coursework experience, those are things to look for. Not everybody walks in the door with those, so you really got to hone in on what skills they may be able to bring to the table. You want to consider their experience, their expertise. Does it coincide with your values and skill sets that are important to your organization, or important to your program or a particular grant that you're working from? Really want to focus on those. Again, for both of our positions, we have a scope of service or a job summary outlining what the expectation is overall. Some of those key functions: implement a curriculum, act as a lead caregiver. We want them to uphold licensing and safety protocols. We want to make sure that they understand that licensing exists and what it entails and what things like ratios are. Interacting with school staff, relationships is in there. We would definitely want them to have relationships with the students, but also with families, school day personnel, whatever other stakeholders, whoever it may be. Relationship building is huge for our teams. Collecting data, right? If you're working from a grant, you may need certain data. This person not only is working with kids, but they may also be helping with those data and admin pieces. Creating lesson plans, modifying things as needed, collaborating. Those are keywords: collaboration, assuming responsibility. Patty and I talk a lot about our teams. We love when folks have initiative and drive and are very enthusiastic. We've been around a minute and kind of know what those key components are. So those are kind of two just examples from the management side and that frontline side of language that you can grab and put in your job descriptions. Again, a good job description is critical really to the individual and to the organization, right? We want to build individuals. We want to grow our field. We want to give them all the tools that they need. We don't just want them to fill a seat. We want them to be engaged and we want them to grow in their career. So how do you find that right candidate? All the things that we need to look for. It really starts, after we know the LAURA and the MOST requirements. Now it's time to vet and interview your candidate. You've got your job description in place, and now you're ready to get people in the door and have a conversation with them. So you're going to be looking at their resume, looking at their experience with youth, looking at their education. You're looking at those child-related fields and seeing what those key things are on that resume. But the interview itself, a resume can look great or it may not look so great, but sometimes there's so much that comes out of that interview process that you just like, wow, this person really wowed me. Their resume didn't look so hot, but after having a conversation with them, I was able to pull out some things and had a really great conversation. I think this person was right for the job. Or it could be the opposite. Sometimes they have the greatest looking resume and you just didn't see it. Nothing came out. They didn't expand on things. They answered in generalities. They didn't give concrete examples. And that's really frustrating to a manager. It's when they're not offering up those concrete examples. You want to know that folks have had experience, that they can solve a problem, Even if they're giving an example of a problem that they solved, not related to youth. I mean, just being able to troubleshoot and come to a solution on any problem goes a long way. That tells you that they have good judgment and can handle those issues when they happen, unpredicted issues. Okay, so that brings us to our first breakout session. So we are going to divide you into groups. I'm going to put this Jamboard link in the chat in a moment, but to click on it and show you what you all are going to see. We are giving you all the same question. You're going to be divided into a group, and you're going to use this Jamboard to share your ideas. So we want you to discuss with your group any strategies, questions, techniques that can be used during the interview process so that you can gain the most useful information in selecting the right candidate for your out of school time program, right? So some of you may have some great questions or techniques that you use. Some of you may not be strong in that area and you may need some assistance. This may be a gap area for you. So we tried to pair you all in a strategic way to get some of the new folks with some veteran folks so you can learn a little bit about from each other. Share some of your interview experiences, what worked, what didn't work. So we're going to give you, I don't know, Patty, do you have an idea on how much time we want to give folks? We can plan
Carla, I think we would like to give folks 10 minutes.
Okay.
And I'm just finishing up these breakout rooms now. So, yeah, about 10 minutes for everyone.
Yeah. Yep, that sounds good. And just to give you a rundown, if you're not familiar with the Jamboard, you just, let me start that again. If you look to the left here, there's a toolbar, and you can click on a sticky note, write your good stuff on here, and then hit save. And then you're on your way. And then this Jamboard is a living document. We'll share this out with you. So all of these great ideas that you all are sharing, you can take with you, take back to your programs and your team. Again, these are divided by rooms. So if you're in room 1, you're going to populate this slide. Up top is the arrow to advance to the next frame. So if you're in room 2, you're going to be here, room 3, room 4, and so on. So once you hop in the Jamboard with the link, find your room. Let me know. Hopefully I've shared it appropriately. Nobody's going to get stuck by an access issue. If so, I'll make sure I adjust it, but I think I got it so that everybody can access it.
And we're ready.
All right, Patty. So take us away into the Jamboards and we'll see you all in about 10 minutes and we'll be sharing out.
We can't hear your voice.
Looks like we had a lot of feedback on the Jamboards. Apologies. I know there was a couple that could not access the Jamboard. Apologies about that, but hopefully when we get this out to you later, you'll be able to access it or see it on the slide. So we want to take a few minutes. We are going to have a break after this session where we share out, but we want to take a few minutes to hear from the group. I won't really go into selecting rooms, just whoever, if we want to get a couple, 2 or 3 people that would like to share kind of their best practice, their strategy, technique, or something that you learned from somebody in your conversation that you are going to take back with you, something maybe you haven't tried before that you'd like to. So we'll open it up for the next few minutes. Who'd like to share? Don't be shy. I know it's Monday. Madeline, go ahead. I think I saw a hand up, and I'm sorry, I'm not good about watching the hands.
Well, a couple things that I had put on our board was like asking people what brought them here or like why they were interested in the job, like specifics of what was interesting to them, and just asking them like what experience have you had working with kids and things like that to kind of get a good idea, and to ask them if like if they're currently employed, why they're leaving their other job, and what's intriguing them about this position.
Yeah, kind of knowing their why, you know, and you can learn a lot from that response. Yeah, good stuff. Thank you. Who else?
I kind of shared in my group that I like to make sure that the candidate is as comfortable as possible. And I kind of give a spiel before every interview that I hold. And I let them know that I want to keep it as much like a conversation as possible. And so I don't want the rehearsed version of them, the one that Googled the top 20 asked questions in an interview. I want to get to know the real them. And so I like to keep it relaxed. I also let them know I put in the sticky note. I like to let them know that the interview goes both ways. So I always give them the example of, okay, you might walk out this door and I'm going to say, oh, I really love Susie. Let's hire her. And Susie might walk out and say, you know, this isn't a good fit. So I encourage them to ask questions about the organization, about the day-to-day, about the job description. I also put that for me, it's really important to make sure that the person has time to get acquainted with the room before I go in. And so typically we'll take them to the room that we're going to interview in. We let them in for a little bit. And then I come in and I introduce myself. I give them a bottle of water. I give them a sheet of the questions because I am a visual person. And so I just say, you know, I might not go in order, but I will tell you ahead of time, you know, okay, so question 2, I'm going to refer to this one. And so I try to be accommodating to all different kinds of people as well. Just some things that I found to be successful.
Thank you, Chelsea. I like all of that. And that goes a long way, just from what you described, that kind of setting the tone, the environment. And sometimes we forget, I know sometimes I forget about that, right? I'm on one appointment to the next and I'm funneling people in and out. That I like the fact that you kind of share the questions ahead of time, that you leave them in the room for a moment to collect themselves, because it is really, I shared at the beginning, I've been here for 20 some years. I haven't been on an interview, and I would probably be, I can't even imagine if somebody had to interview me after not being in an interview. So I really can appreciate that. And that is something I'm going to note for myself, really, to kind of take a look at, just laying out that room, the environment piece of it. So thank you for that. Good stuff. Who else would like to share? I'll kind of flip through these. There's a lot of great responses. Anyone else?
Carla, I'd like to draw attention to Barb's comment in the chat.
Yeah.
She cites she was looking at the Jamboards, and she cites the recovery or on the fly is a lost art these days. Barb, I'm not sure if you're able to share more on that, if you want to flesh that out a little bit, but it's lovely. Thank you for your comment.
I think, Barb, we were having trouble with your sound, right? Are you able? Yeah, she's muted for life, unfortunately, in this, but yeah, all comments are superb. Okay, recovery or on the fly is a lot. Yeah, I wish we could expand on that more with you, Barb. Well, good stuff. Asking how personal values align with the company's core values. Okay, Danny too's having the same issue, a mic issue. Appreciate you guys weighing in on the chat, though. We'll take one more before we take a break. Does anybody want to? And again, this you'll have access to, so you can flip back through these. But does anyone else want to share maybe one more technique, strategy question?
Asking what they do in specific scenarios.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those real life. Yeah, like, because that's our world, right? The unpredictable things that happen.
Yes.
How are you going to handle that? And can you handle it? Can you remain calm? Can you still be, leading and managing? So good stuff. Okay, so we are at about 11:30. We'll take, geez, Sonia, you thinking 5 minutes for everybody to kind of stand up, stretch, walk away, take a break, grab a snack.
Sounds good.
And we'll get back rocking and rolling. So we'll see you shortly. Thanks for the great comments, everyone. these are a couple of other things that Patty and I practice when we onboard folks or interview folks, and some things you might want to consider. Having your candidate in that interview process do a basic skills assessment in math and language arts, right? We want them to not only be able to engage and help children learn, but we want to make sure if we need them to send documentation home to a family, to a parent, a caregiver, that they can do so in a way that, you know, represents all of the things you want them to cover, and can do so, you know, in a way that's grammatically correct and you know, easy to read and flows and so forth. And then we do this at Wayne Metro. We have folks do a lesson plan. We have them write a lesson plan during the interview process. We give them some time, gives them some quiet time to see, you know, what they might come up with. And then another practice might be to submit a writing sample, again, a lesson plan. Again, you know, keeping in mind the licensing stuff is all important, but you really want to strive above and beyond what licensing requires. You really want to have a team member that is going to meet those expectations and then some. Okay, so we're going to transition over to a little bit of a different area of supervision, and that is some components or plans that should be a regular part of your work as you manage out of school time programs. Now, again, as I shared early on, there are lots of things that come into play with supervision and management. What we're sharing today is definitely not the end all be all, but these are some common things that Patty and I felt in our experience that we wanted to hit home with this group during this session. So we're going to look at it from two angles. The first with regard to how you supervise your day-to-day program operations, the logistics, the admin, those pieces. But then we're going to talk about how, as a supervisor, how important it is that you create a positive culture and climate with your team. Being organized and intentional on both fronts is really going to make for a well-rounded, highly capable manager. And so, you know, managers, you are all faced with the balancing act, right, of those administrative tasks, and then also building relationships, building a supportive environment. It's really essential for managers. As managers, you're able to balance both of those worlds, the task oriented and then the relationship building piece. And I know early on, as a new professional many years ago, I was always about like getting the boxes checked off, meeting the grant requirements, managing the budget, and kind of got lost and forgot about how important it is to like connect with my team and doing team building and making time for that, because we're so outcome focused a lot of times, especially if you're with a community-based organization or work with a grant. You're always like outcomes. So it's balancing both. And for this, I'm going to focus on three key areas. It's how you schedule your staff, how you are visiting and being present in programs, and then those other additional kind of administrative tasks. So when first looking at scheduling your team, there are a lot of things you need to consider when building out a staff schedule. It should incorporate program coverage, right? Obviously, when kids are present, you've got to have your staff there, but also all the things that need to happen when program is not operating. And this can be challenging in our world because a lot of the positions we work with, they're part-time positions, right? So you really need them when program's happening, but you probably don't have a huge budget to have them any other additional time. So it's really kind of that balancing act. For us here at Wayne Metro, a lot of my part-time team, they're anywhere between 15, 20, 25 hours. My programming in the 21st century world is really 3 hours a day, Monday through Thursday. So I really know I need them those 12 hours to be on site, interfacing with students, right? Ensuring safety, ensuring ratios, ensuring kids are supported, kept safe. And then if they're working a 20-hour week, I have 8 hours to play with to help them, to give them time for lesson planning, to build in time for professional development, team building, and so on. So things to keep in mind: you got to meet the needs of your students first, your children first, right? So you schedule according to your program. You want to make sure schedules are consistent and they're posted. You don't want to mess around with schedules. That makes for kind of a stressful work-life balance, right? You don't want to keep mixing schedules up. You want to have some consistency. You want to make sure your staff are able to connect with their other employees or coworkers, having time carved in for those networking opportunities within your program staff. You got to build in time for meetings, right? And break time, depending how long their shift is. You need to consider those licensing rules. Do you have enough staff to cover ratios, depending on what age group? So you want to make sure that's covered. You want to make sure you have time for professional development, as I mentioned. Planning for unplanned illnesses or emergencies when staff may be out long-term or may need to go home early. That's the reality we're faced kind of day to day, playing that staff shuffle. Do you have plans for that? Vacation time when folks are taking time off. Are you clear on your call off procedures? How far in advance do you want to know? For us, you know, it's as soon as possible. We'd like at least 2 hours notice at the least, prior, you know, more than that if possible, but we know sometimes things happen, but we need to have enough time to plan accordingly. And then making sure your team is aware of what the chain of command is, who they're contacting in the event they need to call off or they're coming in late. Who is that person? What is that phone number? What is that process? Is it an email and a phone call? Is it a text? Whatever it may be. And then with regard to program visits, obviously as a manager, as a leader, you want to be present in program. You want to be approachable. You want staff to see you around, not behind a desk, hiding in another room. You'll need to be intentional about the time of day. If you're working with an after-school program and you're hearing transition times are an issue, or you're noticing incidents tend to happen around transition time, maybe you need to make sure you're there at transition time, or maybe pickup's a mess. So maybe being there at those crucial times, immerse yourself in those moments. You may have to fill in, right? As a manager, a lot of us do that, right? If you don't have enough staff, you're the one running program that day along with some other people. So you might need to fill yourself in there. And then that's when your whole schedule's like, whatever I had planned today, nope, I got to shift gears. I got to be flexible, got to be present at program. It's probably a good practice to kind of document your visits, when you go, what time, what you witnessed, not kind of as a interrogation, but just kind of your observations, so that when you go back to your office, you can reflect on what you observed, what you notice, what you might need to address, what we might need to praise, so on and so forth. You want to have some cadence or frequency to your visits, right? You don't want to just be once every 6 months, you know, try to get there maybe every other month, every other week, whatever it is, every other day, whatever feels good to you, whatever your team needs. You want to have some sort of cadence so they know when to expect you and can rely on you. You're there to make sure. Yes.
Can you just go over the requirements before a person can start in a site? They don't require 8 hours of training before a person can work with youth. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between that 8-hour recommendation through most and what's required before you can actually work on site?
You mean the background checks and such?
So the question is that someone is thinking that their staff must have 8 hours of training prior to working with youth. So could you just go over that distinction a little bit?
So that's the recommendation from most. That is what high quality programs would have a mechanism, a process in place to make sure in the onboarding process, maybe it's day one after they go through HR, maybe the next phase is they're with you starting on some of that 8-hour training. And maybe you do that 8-hour training before they're even interfacing with kids. That is the most standard. That is not a licensing requirement. Now, a lot of us, we need folks in classrooms right away or in centers right away. So we're getting them in there. But a best practice would be to make sure you have a plan in place in the upfront as best as you can. If you can't do it within the first week, maybe it's the first couple weeks, to get those 8 hours of orientation, that training in, and it's on youth development, it's on social emotional learning. It may be also involved if you're working with a grant, what that grant expects, what are the guidelines and goals of the grants. Does that clarify things, or is that, again, that's the most recommendation. That is what you want to strive for. And have and part of that is to have a process, to think thoughtfully how you do that for every person that is hired into your program.
That's clear. And I'll go over that a little bit more in the PD section. Thank you, Carla. Just to restate really clearly, the only requirement from Lara, the Licensing and Regulatory Affairs Department, is those mandated trainers: abusive head trauma, bloodborne pathogens, and
mandated reporter, abuse and neglect,
yep. So that most wants you to do more training than that. Michigan out of school time standards calls for more, but that is not a legal requirement.
Correct. Yes. Thanks for clarifying that, Patty. Yeah. Yep. Okay. So with regard again to observations, I think I was starting to mention, like, kind of documenting your visits, so you kind of know when you want to follow up with your teams, what you observed, what the high points were, where there's some gap areas that need work. You want to be looking out for age appropriate practices, right? Making sure it's not complete chaos. You're looking for your team to make sure they're operating in a professional manner, and that they're engaging with the students, the other staff, with the families, all highly in a professional way. So you have to make time for those. I know for me, that's sometimes a struggle. In our world, we have 24 sites here at Wayne Metro, so it's hard for me to get out, but I know if I'm placing things on the calendar, making a plan, that's what's going to drive me to get out and to see those sites. Then, of course, you have all the administrative tasks. You want to make sure as a manager, you're interfacing with families, that they know who you are, they know who to go to if they have a concern or a question. You have the task of managing the budget, right? Making sure you got enough money for supplies or maybe food that you need for your program. You have to, you're probably the one that maybe has to order those things, right? Balancing that, coordinating professional development. That's in your list of your regular rotating tasks. And then making sure program records are, where they need to be on site, making sure you have all the documentation for the students. If you're a licensed program, you got to have that child information record, your registration form. It's making sure all those components are tidied up. And look for opportunities to grow your staff. If there are opportunities for them to shadow you, I'm going to talk more about this in a second, but it's always good to have a second person that can kind of help pick up the slack if you're out long-term or you need to take some time off. But it's also just building that bench strength. Your folks come in the door and they may be working part-time, but they may want a growth opportunity. They may want to be a manager someday. So it's bringing them into that world too, a little bit at a time when it makes sense, so that they can learn. And that kind of brings me to establishing a culture.
Carla, can I interrupt you there? I'm getting some questions in the chat box.
Oh, thank you for helping.
Yes. So remember back to the beginning, when Carla stated there are licensing requirements. Those are the legal aspects. Those are the aspects that could get your site shut down, written up, if they're not followed. Most is that next level, that higher level of program quality. People need to have a fingerprint check, background check through the Child Care Background Check Organization, CCBC. They need to have abusive head trauma, bloodborne pathogens, and mandated reporter. Those 3 trainings are included in the health and wellness courses in my registry. The other items in the health and wellness through my registry are not required before a person can step foot on in with children. So you would be well served if you can't do it all before a person goes on site, you would be well served to find those 3 trainings in another way than the health and wellness course. And they have them. Michigan Virtual, EduPass. Thank you, EduPaths. They all have those 3 trainings in a shorter, in a smaller session. The health and wellness is 4 to 8 hours. And so if you're going to put your staff through the health and wellness to complete those 3 areas, then it's going to take longer for you to get your staff on site. So it's really important here that I don't suggest to you that you cut corners and get your folks those 3 trainings and get them on site as quick as possible. But the world we live in, that may be your situation, where you have to be able to have people to meet ratios, etc. I do have some creative ideas for you on how you can do that and not sacrifice safety and quality and help to train at the same time. But health and wellness must be completed within, I believe it's 90 days of a staff person's hire. 90 days or 60 days, Carla?
90.
90 days. So when you have 90 days for them to complete that My Registry training, that gives you a little bit of breathing space, but you don't have 90 days for bloodborne pathogens, mandated reporter, and abusive head trauma. I hope that answers your question, Mr. Pita. Please clarify if you need more information. Let me know if you need more information.
Yes, thank you, Patty, for following up on those. And I did put a couple of links. I repeated a couple of links. So I just threw in the EduPaths, which Patty mentioned. So I think that's a really good resource to have at your fingertips for some of those trainings. I reinserted the LARA childcare licensing regulations. That's in there if you need that. And then the My Registry. A note on the My Registry, if you have staff connecting with that, please make sure they do it with their personal email address and not their work email address. That is a professional portfolio profile that stays with them no matter where they go. They'll want to have access to that because that's going to house all of their professional development. So that's my I've learned the hard way tip for all of you not to make that mistake. So but make sure you guys got your stuff in My Registry. Okay, so establishing a culture, super huge, super important. Being mindful of the work culture you create as a supervisor is something that can get overlooked if we're too focused on the day-to-day work outcomes, things like that. Creating a positive work environment not only impacts the employee, but your program and your organization. It fosters more employee engagement. They're more engaged. They have better buy-in. It helps you attract and recruit talent, which is also important and essential in our world. Creating a positive culture increases productivity, creativity, but most important, it trickles down to the students and the families that you serve, right? If your employees are feeling good, you know, they're going to be positive and strong and steady in the work environment. And that makes for, you know, positively engaged students and families. So what does that look like during the day? There's several things, right? As a manager, be a listener, have that active listening. Don't just kind of like nod your head and yeah, but really ask some probing questions, soak in what they're saying. Staff have a lot of value and contributions to make, and it's very important that we listen to them. Following through, If you're gonna say, I'll get back with you tomorrow, please make sure you do. And if you didn't, that's the follow-up. Sorry, I didn't get to this, but I still am planning to. Just staying in communication goes a long way. You don't want folks to feel like they can't approach you or that you're ignoring them. Involve your team in decision-making, right? In meetings, asking for that feedback, what ideas they may have. Recognition, making sure you recognize those high points. Even the smallest of things deserve, some recognition, highlights. I think that goes a long way with folks. It's infectious. Other people hear their managers singing praises of other people. And sometimes that's like, oh, I want to feel that. I want to have a shout out directed towards me. So it kind of gets folks motivated. Think about your folks in the workspaces. This can be particularly challenging if some of you are in school buildings and you're borrowing space, but try to make the most of it. Carve out sections for staff to take a break, to have some self-care moments if they need it during the busy workday, whether it's bringing in some plants or a sound machine with some, relaxing sound, something that keeps them in mind, knowing that they might need a quiet spot or a place to retreat in a moment when things get pretty hectic. Allow time for reflection, giving staff time in their schedule to think about their own performance, their career, things they want to work on and grow. We do that a lot here at Wayne Metro. We want folks to, we have a lot of opportunity for them to grow. So we want to make sure we're carving out time for them to think about their long-term goals and about their performance. And don't be afraid, the biggest one, to be vulnerable. When I was younger in my career, I made a lot of really stupid mistakes, thinking I had to have, as a manager, all the answers. It took me a minute before I was like, you know what, guys, I just don't know this, or I can try to find out, but honestly, I don't know, or I may need your help. That took a lot of pressure off me, right? Could be a little more vulnerable with my team, and be honest. Like, sometimes I just don't know the answer. It's just beyond, my limit. And so I'm not afraid to have those moments and be real with them on that. And I hope on their end that they can be that way with me as well. If they, I don't want them to hide things. I want them to be honest and upfront. There are some things you can do too outside of the workday. You guys can work on a community project of some sort. Those team building opportunities are huge when you have a chance without students present, without children, to interact with one another. Keep in mind, After School Professionals Appreciation Week. If you're not familiar with that, you need to hop over to the National After School Association website. It's typically the third week of April. Historically, I don't know when it is this year, but do some special things that week. Bring in donuts, do an ice cream social, write notes, whatever it may be. Be thoughtful. If you're working in partnership with the school, let your school day folks know, hey, it's After School Professionals Appreciation Week. And, if you see my team, please acknowledge them. Do potlucks. Those are simple things. Highlight not only those like career and program successes, but personal successes. If you have a college student who's graduated or somebody's getting married, take a minute to acknowledge what's going on with them personally, and let them know that you care about that work-life balance. Be intentional with your meetings. Try to have some sort of icebreaker. Don't make it all like business from top to bottom. Ask some questions about the weekend. Those little things, I think, go a long way and are really important, and are sometimes hard for managers when we're really outcome driven or, worried about a lot of the things that us as managers worry about. So, okay, so we've covered a lot. But continuing to add to your supervisor toolbox, I am now going to hand it over to Patty to cover leading and managing your teams, in addition to some words around professional development. So with that, Patty, do you want me to stop share, or do you want me to just keep rolling with this?
No, you can switch it over to me.
Okay, I will do that and let you take it from here.
How's that? Did it transition? All right.
You're in business.
Development committee leads our professional development, identifies it, secures it, etc. And the chairs lead those committees. So those 5 committees each have a committee chair. who leads it, and that person is able to put on their resume professional development committee chair. It is just a bonus. It's an extra. It maybe does not help them with wage, but it does help them for future possibilities of either increased wage or an additional job, a different role. Does that answer everyone? Does anyone have any other questions with regard to that?
She shared that was very helpful, Sonia, or Patty.
Great.
Thank you. Yep.
Okay, the 2024 health and safety refresher should be posted sometime. Usually that comes out in about March. So look for it in March. My licensing consultant typically gives me an email when those come up, when those are ready. Here's the great news. Licensing and regulatory affairs, they are working on, and it should be out very soon, a rules and regulations guidebook for out of school time programs only, so that you don't have to go through that whole licensing and the rules and regs book for all childcare centers. They are doing one that will pull out of school time, before and after school, and summer, etc. Back to the refresher course, my consultant typically emails me when those are out. She does a mass email to all of her license sites and says, hey, that refresher is out. The 8-hour health and safety training is also being reconfigured on my registry to include just the out of school time requirements, so that you will no longer have to have your staff sit through the shaken baby and some of those younger student or full day program requirements. Any questions? Sonia, I noticed that you, are there any other questions in the chat box that you noticed that I haven't gotten at?
No questions.
Okay.
Patty?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I did have a question.
Yes.
So right now, the health and safety is in Michigan virtual. Will the specific out of school time also be in Michigan virtual, or will that be in the my registry?
Thank you so much, Chelsea. Yes, they moved it from my registry to Michigan virtual. That is where the other one will be as well. So
Okay, perfect.
you will be able to sign up through my registry. Thank you so much for that clarification.
Absolutely.
Okay, any other questions? All right, we've only got about 15 more minutes. So we're going to reconfigure here a little bit, and I'm going to fly through these slides. We're going to have Sonia share the slides with you so that you can have those for your reference. My contact information is on the final slide. So we will be able to, please reach out to me. You have any questions, please reach out to me. Love to help in any way I can. So, all right, Carla, thank you so much for bringing us to where we are. The next few slides all relate to your HR department. Your HR department should have things in place that will help you to navigate now that you've got your team, right? Carla took us through the hiring. She took us through questions. She took us through all of those things. We've now developed our team. We've now got our team on board, and we're ready to start working as a team. Here we go. They're all great. Most of them, 90% of them, 99% of them are all great. And then everybody comes to work. And sometimes there's a struggle. There are some issues that show up that you never thought would happen when you're actually in the interview process. So I'm going to talk a little bit about all of these things that can help you. HR should have a standard operating procedures manual. If they do not, you should have one. They are hard. I know it's a daunting task. My standard operating procedures manual is probably 40 some pages long. And we didn't have one when I started at Access. Just start it. And as you go through your practice or your development of it, it will grow and it will help you. The standard operating procedures manual is the first place where you start your sound, solid, quality communication. These are the things we expect. This is the process for how you do it. So that goes to clear communications on this slide. You want to have meetings. You want your meetings to be consistent. You want them to be weekly, monthly, whatever they are, but make sure people can count on them. Because the minute you start adding things or doing things or telling your staff or your team things, and then you don't follow through, that creates an uncertain environment. Patterned behavior is what people learn to count on, and you want it to happen within your organization. Probably the most important thing you could do is stick to a schedule, okay, on your meetings and regular performance evaluations. Licensing and regulatory affairs requires that you have one formal evaluation every year for your staff. And that's what you would want, right? You would want to make sure that you know if you're not doing something correctly, how that you would like to know that that's the way people feel. And you would also like a coach or someone to help you with setting your career development and your goals. So have that same opportunity with your team. Please make sure, Carla and Sonia, that you're interrupting me if we have any questions. What happens when staff performance does not meet the expectations? Quality improvement practices include communication. As always, it's the root to everything, right? Think about it. Everything in your life, everything that you've experienced that has gone not the way you wanted it was most likely because of communication. And upon reflection, anything that you would think of to correct it would all include communication. Too much is never a problem. Too little always is. So when you have to do some correction or someone is not doing what your expectation is, state it verbally, then maybe send it in an email, then maybe have a meeting, but always remember to be fair. If someone's not doing what's expected, 9 times out of 10, 9.9 times out of 10, it is not with malicious intent. It is simply because they don't know what to do. So please make sure and have the conversation. When you have to issue any sort of correction, make sure that in the conversation, you talk about specifically what it is that you want to see. For example, during homework session, I noticed that some of the kids need help. It would really be great if you could go and station yourself at a table with this group to help them with homework. And I expect that you'll do that at the next homework session. Do you have any question? Or is that confusing? Or, how can I help with that? All right. Great teams don't just happen, they're created. I'm going to tell you, it's intentionality, it's trust, And trust is a big factor. Try not to call employees out in front of anyone. We all know this. This is basic. This is 101, right? But sometimes, I know, sometimes for me, in light of the new ability to hire underage or people at 17, the phone is really important. So it's really necessary for me to make sure that in my standard operating procedures manual, I say we do not use phones in the classroom unless it's for education purposes. And I will, if I have a team member who is constantly on their phone, I will, after work is done or after their session is done in a private group, I will talk about what the expectation is. Draw connections between performance and team's capacity to attain their goals. That's really important. Scaffolding is as important for adults as it is for children, right? It doesn't make sense if you've made so many leaps that I don't understand the 6 or 7 items that you've leaped. So be sure to be really informative with your team. If there's a problem, explain why, explain what the impact of that is, and no assumptions. Common sense is not so common anymore. So please don't assume that anyone has the information that you have. We were going to go into some breakout rooms. We can't do that today. I'm so sorry. This would have been fun. Maybe I can get Sonia to invite me back and Carla and I back, and we can maybe get this part done. And share some of our experiences. Leading is hard. Corrective action is hard. Talking to your team about areas for growth is hard. No one wants to be corrected. I don't. You don't. So the manner with which or in which we correct people and help them to get on the right path is extremely important. I oftentimes think about talking to people in the way that I hope my children's bosses talk to them. Not a you did something wrong, but hey, this is what we're hoping for. This is what I notice. How do you think we can get there? What works for you? And that's all nice and rose-colored glasses. And sometimes we meet folks that it just doesn't work. But if you take these steps to think of yourself as a coach and trying to get a person to the next level of their growth in this area, then pretty soon what happens for people is they realize the positive intent. They hope, they understand that it's a growth opportunity, and they also may understand that they don't have the skill to do it, in which case they may choose to go and not leave mad, but leave grateful for the opportunity and grateful for the growth and the education that they've received from it. Okay, and let me go through this. Oh, here's, I'm gonna fly through this slide. These are all the requirements. We've already gone over these. When you think about professional development, please also think about your agency's professional development. Access requires some HIPAA training. It requires customer service training. It requires cultural diversity, emergency preparedness, all of those things. So as you're building your professional development, make sure you keep those things in mind too, because those things are oftentimes, can oftentimes cover some of the things that you want to get to, but maybe due to staffing and shortages of staff, you haven't gotten to because you need someone on site. I can't stress enough, and I'm gonna quickly give you my biggest component, recommendation, advice to you that I can possibly give, and then we're going to open it up to questions. Build your calendar. In March, I start to build the following year's calendar. You know what needs to happen. You know that if you're a school age program, you need to have a school year program that you need to meet with your team in August, early August, mid-August. If you're a full year program, then you know that you are going to need to have monthly onboarding trainings for your team. All the new people who just came on in the last 30 days, put that on your calendar. And I suggest you put that on the full year calendar at the same time every month. The third Friday of every month is a onboarding and orientation. The second week of every month or quarterly, we are going to be bringing everyone together to get those 8 hours of training that are recommended by most. You may not be able to do it before they can start at a program, but you can certainly do it. And that gets you there. It gets you close enough. And it is the best that you can do. So while most calls for Michigan out of school time standards call for some higher quality or higher or more, put more requirements to level us up, sometimes you can't do it. Sometimes what you need to do is something that's similar to what they require. So please, and thank you, Carla, for sharing my email address. Feel free to reach out to me. I am happy to share my professional development year-long calendar training tools with you, and some of the things that I've learned over the years, where to put what on the calendar. Happy to help. So let's open it up for questions. Anyone have any questions? I am so sorry we didn't get to all of this.
Yeah, and we could kind of, if anybody had a comment or two on a critical conversation or something you had to address with staff that was, you know, a challenge for you and how you overcame it, we might have a minute or two to kind of touch on that. That's the breakout that we didn't get into.
Yeah, so any questions, we'll give you a chance to think of some questions, and please unmute and ask away.
And just FYI, Sonia did pop in the link to the survey. It is in the chat.
You touched base with the whole phone thing, like that, you want to be clear about what their phones are for, especially with most of us having such young staff. How do you determine what is actually, I mean, we all know what is supposed to be used, your phone used for, but how do you like sit over somebody's shoulder to make sure they're properly using their phone? Do you end up moving on to like tablets so that they don't have their phones on them, but they can still access whatever they need to log information and have a way to communicate out with the rest of the staff? Or how do you do it?
So thank you, Kristen. That's a great question. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we do it. So the first thing I did was we had conversations with our high school students. Remember, they are learning how to work in the world. They don't get it. This is a generation that has come up with or has grown up with phones right there, right? And they don't know that phones are inappropriate. So that scaffolding that I talked about, explain it to them, why it's an issue. And then have a meeting, have a group meeting, identify the situation, talk about it. And then, yes, by all means, go to a different sort of system that can, that will just create the environment that you want, but always and everywhere. We want to try to give people an opportunity, right, to correct their behavior and learn the right thing. My 17-year-olds are people that I am creating or teaching to be future great staff members in the world. So anybody else have comments for Kristen? That was a great question, Kristen.
I'll add a little bit of, and this is a little bit of a different angle, but sometimes effective. You know, when you're a licensed program, and God forbid should an incident happen, and it was on your watch, your manager's watch, or a staff member's watch, and an investigation happens, and it deems that, you know, a staff person is responsible, that's kind of a public record, right? When that licensing consultant does her investigation, they post that publicly on the licensing website underneath that particular program. You can see all the inspection reports, any violations. So sometimes the point might be to hit home. You don't want to be negligent working with students because you're on your phone, not paying attention, because that could have consequences that could impact your career. I mean, again, it's a little bit of a different angle, but if you're having trouble hitting the point home, it's like you got to be careful that an incident doesn't happen because you're not paying attention, you're on your phone, and then a student goes missing or gets hurt, and the investigation shows that a staff person was negligent. That goes in that report, and that could impact you professionally, your career down the road. So it is something to really be serious about. There's a reason. It's not just because we, you know, want to tell you what to do. It's just, it's a bigger picture, and it's safety, and it's looking out for your career, you know, longevity in the field. So that's an angle I've had to use before to hit that home. I don't want to say I come out the gate like that, oh, you're gonna get in trouble, you know, but sometimes they don't realize the big picture, the reality of why that could be such a bigger issue.
Right, and that's that scaffolding, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's how we do it. Take people where they're at and grow them. I hope somebody does that for me. So in that, I will want to do that for others.
That's the thing too, have a succession plan as a manager, like build your bench strength, right? Or if something happens to you, who on your team can you lean on? And it's making sure they have those opportunities to bring them into the fold and into the mix, learn some things, and it only can benefit them, even if they move on from your organization, which happens. Sometimes the best folks move on, but if it's for a growth opportunity and you help to foster that and massage that, well, more power to you. I mean, that's the sign of a good manager, growing your team, either if they stay internally or spread their wings elsewhere. They'll always remember you for that, right? We remember those folks that made an impact on us, a good manager, a good boss that believed in you. So really appreciate the feedback in the chat. We'll be happy to learn from the survey as well, that feedback. Patty and I would like to thank MASP for allowing us to be with you all today. Really honored to be here. It was great to see so many of you on which I know is a first day back. So thank you very much. Please, the QR code is there. Love the QR codes, makes it so easy. So yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks everyone for the feedback. Really appreciate it. Glad this was useful. Reach out to us. We're happy to chat with people. If you have great ideas, please share them with us. We learn from each other for sure. So thank you all. We'll stick around for a minute or two if folks have additional